Hello, hi Sara.
Hello, Tatiana. Lovely to see you.
I'm so excited to be here with you. And hi to all our listeners now and later online. Sara Milne Rowe, trusted advisor, executive coach, a host of wonderful podcast Better Under Pressure. Really a mentor and a guide to many senior leaders, an author of wonderful book, The Shed Method, is here with us. Let's play, Sarah. So,
Aha, thank you.
so my first question to you, and we already had some conversation pre our launch, and it's always this dynamic of speaking too much pre the launch. You are an expert in better under pressure and interviewed so many leaders, and yet intensity is something different and something similar.
hmm Mm.
So for
Yes.
me, intensity is energy, and sometimes this energy can lead to creation.
hmm
Like even babies are conceived in intensity in intense moments, and sometimes it can lead to distraction.
hmm
I'm wondering what do you understand when you hear the word?
Yeah, I've really been thinking about this actually as we've just spoken about, Tatiana, that I think it's a word actually I don't use very often. Um, but as I've been reflecting on it, I think intensity is around passion for something.
Mm.
And sometimes a bit like pressure, it can really allow you to create something phenomenal, be it in a conversation, be it something, a project. It's fully focused. I think intensity for me is around passion, full focus, like laser like focus on something that really means something to you. That's how I would interpret the word
Mm.
intensity.
Yeah, that's definitely very much resonates. It's an important. It's basically direction of energy to something that is really meaningful and with what we are passionate about. And yet, sometimes that full focus becomes almost like a tunnel vision. And you mentioned before we went live that you are observed in teams when it's really productive and when it's destructive. We can see it outside of us, right?
Mhm.
And I can so much resonate to that from the trading floor, from working with my clients.
Mm.
So how is it that something that actually fundamentally, which is so good, like a passion, can
Mhm.
lead to something that can become destructive?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's true is true for pressure. That we can engage with pressure so much that it becomes uh, very well more negative and lead to more distress than something that is potentially allowing you to achieve more than you thought possible. Right. So that's what interests me about pressure. I think the same is true of this energy of intensity. I think the skill of intensity is understanding how it's landing just on yourself, not just on yourself, but also on other people. So, what I often witness in teams, for example, is somebody is very intense around a point, or they are holding on to a train of thought, and they have lost their way in terms of how it's being received or how it's landing on those that they are in relationship with. And I think that can happen a lot when you're in a team, but also it can happen when you lose the relationship with yourself too. So that
Mm.
you're intensely focusing on something. And and to me, there's a difference between flow when it feels hugely liberating and wonderfully creative and time disappears. Intensity when it's gone over the mark of it being positive, or that laser-like focus that we've just been talking about in relation to oneself, is when you become like a dog with a bone and you will not let it go. either for yourself, but I see it a lot in relationship with other people. And then you start switching people off. And then what I see happening is that the intensity from the person who's giving it, then they go even further in. They've lost the sense of how the energy is radiating or impacting anybody else. And that, I think, is a skill and a practice.
Wow. I love how you expressed it, especially like describing it, going from something that is flaw to becoming like a dog with a bone, right? And losing this perspective, this awareness. So it's like, for me, it's like getting into this tunnel vision almost, and losing this ability to be aware and to be actually curious of your surroundings.
Well, actually, I think you lose touch with the goal or the intent. And that's what I witness. And it's also how I experience very intense people when I find myself physically repelling. Like they've gone too far with me, and now I find myself backing off. And I have a really strong barometer to that personally. And I see people when I'm witnessing a team, or I'm witnessing, a moment that is very important to a team. There's a very fine line when it becomes a really passionate and useful and healthy debate into people doggedly, and I keep using that word, but doggedly hanging on to something that they believe in, and they've lost touch with all of those things mentioned, like curiosity, or there must be something else, there's another view. And it happens bodily, Tatiana, really interestingly as well. You can literally see people leaning in, the laser light focus comes to the eyes, and it becomes almost close to an attack versus something that is in relation to something.
Yeah, I love how you're visually describing that, and I could feel it. Like it's almost losing touch with the goal. So, and actually going into this energy of proving.
Yes.
I need to prove my point rather than there is actually nothing to prove. Because when there is nothing to prove, when it's not about defending or attacking, energetically, then we can be really impactful and connected with purpose, and being able to hear others and also hear our own signals, because having been described as an intense person sometimes on the trading floor and in life, I feel deeply. It's like, actually now with the work that I've done on myself, I can feel inside me when this almost color of intensity becomes too bright red. I'm wearing red today, like becomes almost like, let go. So,
I think that's true. And I'm trying to visualize, and you're right, it is a physical feeling. For me, it's definitely a physical feeling that I witness in, I'm drawn to, I was a teacher for 13 years of my career. And I remember she was quite a petite English teacher. And every single student I came across, and this was a large school, absolutely loved listening to her, enjoyed her lessons, found them incredibly stimulating, thought she was an excellent teacher. And the way they described her was she never forced anything. And yet you never and this was a challenging school, right? So but you didn't dare misbehave. And I always think of her in these sorts of conversations because she was very focused, but she was very focused on getting the best out of this group of children, all at different levels, all at different stages of learning. But there was something very energetically aligned in that focus, which wasn't around proving. And she pulled the students towards her energetically rather than pushing them or creating some sort of, ultimatum.
Wow, this is so powerful. So sounds like she was really present to herself and to others and were able to direct energy into the focus which she felt was important.
Yeah. And she could also have a laugh. I think there's something about lightness and humor that's really, really important for me in this. The minute that doesn't happen, I can feel myself. Like I think you can still really be passionate and in focus and have a really strong goal and keep light.
Yeah, not taking ourselves too seriously.
Yeah. That's it. I think there is something about that. I think as human beings, we can sniff people taking themselves too seriously, which is different from being really powerfully impactful and dynamic, in my world as a leader.
Yeah, and that's what exactly when people take themselves too seriously, and it can happen sometimes in anyone's life, right? It's like we disconnect, we become like the focus becomes very self-orientated. So it's like talking about this focus, right? Where the focus is directed. Is it truly directed to the purpose, to what you're trying to achieve? Or is it directed to you being right?
Yes.
To you making this point?
Yes.
Are you prepared to let go of you being right in service of the purpose?
Yes.
And I find it fascinating, this example of this teacher that you described, Sara, because I'm thinking of many leaders we both are working with. Imagine if you could have bottled it up, what this small woman was doing in a school with challenging kids, so that and gave it as appeal to the CEO leading the team. What would it be?
Well, I think for me, there's something around. I sort of want to say utter self-belief in terms of you're okay, you're grounded, you're okay, you're not dependent. Your value isn't dependent on anyone else. Your value is very much within. And I think when you can learn or have practices or ways of reminding yourself that you have your own super strength and your own groundedness and your own capacity to manage yourself, then I think you open up a different force around you, actually, which pulls people in. And what I'm interested in with my relationship with my inquiry around pressure, talking to leaders, is there's clearly a barometer that the more you deal with an element of pressure, the better you get at regulating yourself in the pressure. So that you can keep growing and keep learning. I mean, my love of pressure is that when it's in the right sort of amount for you, you can grow and keep extending and expanding, and you can say, God, yeah, look, I've managed that, and your body never forgets that. So that when the next level of pressure comes, there's a certain amount you can get to. And I know through like 2.5 years of conversations now with leaders about this, that so much of it is dependent on how well you're experimenting in relation to pressure. And I presume the same is true with intensity, is to what's the experiment with yourself around, I feel passionately about this. I believe it can make a difference. I want to influence and impact the people that are in front of me, whoever they are. What's my best way of doing that given who's in front of me? And being able to do the dance without being in any way untrue, but being as much out as in.
Yes, and it's developing those muscles, right? Of how does it feel where the impact is actually not going the way how you desire it actually to go, and where the team needs to go. And I love how you said it's, on one hand, it's about this self-trust, because in the model, in the book I'm writing, it's exactly, for me, health intensity lives when we are very aware of our purpose, of the purpose of the team, and we are in self-trust. So as you, in one of the session I know you led for our community, was unshakable self-belief, right? So
Self-belief, absolutely, yeah. How do you build unshakable self-belief, but at the same time you don't become stuck in feeling that's who I am, that actually you're constantly evolving and you're constantly choosing in the choices that you make to learn and keep growing and keep evolving. And I think, you know, when you go back to intensity, I think there are different phases of your life where intense, you know, it's the same pressure comes in different phases of your life. You talked about, you know, having a child, if you choose to have a child, or, you know, being on the trade floor, if that's what you choose to do. But we make these choices, and then life, if it unfolds in different ways for all of us, and sometimes different pressures happen, and that might spark a different type of energy around intensity. But we're never stuck in one groove all the time. And yet sometimes I think we feel stuck as opposed to allowing ourselves to constantly think, is what worked for me last month, last year, 5 years ago, is that still working for me? Because it may not be, in which case it needs, like any, you know, technical device, it needs a bit of an update.
Yes, I love this description that sometimes we feel stuck, even though we might have done something similar in a different situations before. It's like how to unstuck ourselves. And yeah, and that's exactly where, what if we took ourselves a little bit lighter? What if
Yeah,
the leaders took themselves a bit lighter? It's
yeah,
like, it's a game, and there are different stages. Like, and I know there are difficult things happen to people, and the events can be very distressing, and life can be intense, and other people can appear to you so intense, you know, so often, you know, I hear from clients, oh my gosh, but you don't understand this person in my team. Absolutely horrific, right? Yes. And what if you took it with slightly different perspective?
And that's a choice, but it's also a practice, Tatiana. If you look, what I know so much about the work that we do is most people are in grooves because they've just practiced it longer, and it probably served them, you know, way back. But it's not serving them now, or it's not serving the goal that they want to achieve now. So, you know, at what point do we pause enough to allow ourselves the grace to think, is there something I need to readjust or realign?
Yeah. Do you know, when you speak about that, what comes up to me, it's almost like in a gym. If we always continue doing the same exercises,
Yeah,
those exercises will stop serving at some point, right? So it's like the change is so important. And in the same way, what if something that you used before doesn't serve you anymore? What, you know, having
yeah,
some different approach.
yeah.
So I'm wondering, Sarah, for you in your life, when did you feel you are in this healthy version of intensity, when you are really connected to your purpose, and yet you stay connected to your unshakable self-belief and able to be present to self and to others and recognize the impact?
When do I?
Yes. In what situations do you
Well,
feel like, wow?
I'm actually actively noting them more and more, actually, and to understand what I wanted to be doing more of and what I want to be doing less of. Hey, so I, you know, it varies, Tatiana. Like, you know, for example, I mean, this is a very light example, but it comes to mind in this conversation. Saturday evening, we just got a new kitten, and I've got a dog, as you know. But Saturday night, I found myself sitting out in the garden. I looked up in the tree. The moon was in the sky. The sky was really clear. The cat was like just being very sort of gentle and alert, and the dog was on its back playing with a toy. And I was having some big thinking around something I'm trying to create. And I just went a bit meta on myself for a moment, thinking, what are the ingredients in this moment that is allowing me to feel so strong, so calm, and so creative?
Mm.
So that's what I'm trying to get much more curious about, is what are the ingredients. And now, if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, those probably wouldn't have been the ingredients for me to feel like I'm in a flow, or I'm in a, I mean, I wouldn't call that an intense moment, but I would call it an in-flow moment. An intense moment when I'm really focused is probably when I'm with clients, mostly, or when I'm in a really deep conversation with one of my children, with something that really, really matters to them. And it feels like a very strong, alive, dynamic energy. And it's those moments where you just think, life's good. Life is actually good.
Right. Yes. You see, it's interesting. And those moments are actually very intense.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, though, it's so interesting when you use the word. I've obviously got some labeling around the word intense that for me feels too much.
Yes,
And I think it's possibly because I've had intense people in my life, and I found myself doing that. I found myself recoiling. And yet I know that I can do intense workouts, for example, or I can do intense walks, or I can have, if I'm one of those people, when I go to social events, I just like to have a deep one-to-one conversation with someone rather than flit about and have many, many conversations. That is my natural propensity, is to go one-to-one deep. I love that. But it's also very closely partnered with lightness and having a laugh. So the two need to, I like playing. But when intensity becomes too much is when I'm just doing one thing for too long. Or somebody's doing something to me for too long. It's like they've not understood my boundary. And that's what I think is interesting, going back to teams and back to leadership, is I think the biggest leadership skill is understanding how you move with the person or the team in front of you. And I think that barometer, that radar, is super, super important.
Yeah, it's understanding and feeling the boundaries, because that's what, and taking it with lightness and humor.
Yeah.
And moving with that, it's almost like a good dance. You and me were in this wonderful tango lesson, right? And
Exactly.
that's what, intense dance.
If you force someone to move in the wrong direction, they're going to stumble, or they're going to step on your toe, or it's going to be jarring. And I think you're right. I think it becomes toxic when it goes into proof. I'm right. And I'm going to take my time to make sure that you understand that I'm right. And you can have an intense look, you can have, which is good, I think, sometimes, it's good. It's just, how do you use this beautiful, orchestra of resources that we have in us to the greatest good?
Yeah. You see, for me, it's a life force of energy, right? And so being aware of that, and what is like in a car, there will be some signals that shows, the fuel is running out, or you will look in the mirror. What is it for us that could be that level of indicator, especially for people who are passionate, especially for leaders who are focused on a goal? What would be their indicator to say, do you know what, right now you slightly slipping in this toxic version of intensity?
But I'm sure, Tatiana, there must have been moments when you were on the trading floor where your intensity was super useful and valued by some and less valued by others. I mean, so it's not, it's judging the environment as well, isn't it?
100%. And it's like, what is actually most important right now from your perception? 100%. Exactly. It's like I wouldn't be in my job at that time if I was less intense,
Yeah.
So that's what was asked for. And yet, could it wrap up some people wrong way? Yes. A- And I think it's about awareness.
Yes. Yes. But at what point did you know that you wanted to open your ability to be able to shift out of that when you needed to?
You see, I was very, very surprised when I first time heard that somebody described me as, oh, Tatiana is very intense. Because I was genuinely very surprised because, as you say, that intensity in English language, and even though it's not my mother tongue, I knew that it has negative connotations. And also, it might be used more towards women in senior positions than men sometimes, because men might be more likely to be described as passionate. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, me intense, where people who know me, they know I have the open heart, I actually have a big heart for people. And that was a journey of understanding when it becomes too much for some people. And it might be too much for some people.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing, is to make sure that it's back to that unshakable self-belief again, isn't it? It's back to that sense of I know who I am, that if that happens, that's a choice, but you're in charge of that choice.
Right. And also understanding, because, for me, for example, I see intensity operating in the same four worlds in which we are operating, which is emotional, mental, physical, and energetic, spiritual. So I think there are people who are more intense in one world rather than the other, and sometimes in a mixture. So for me, I'm very emotionally intense, for example. So what does it mean? When things happen, I feel things very deeply. So it means I can get into this tunnel vision of my own emotions. So being aware of that, for example, for me, what about you? I'm actually wondering if in those four worlds, where is your world where you become more intense?
Probably spirit.
Wow, interesting.
But I think that's what's evolving for me. I think it's that sense of emotion and spirit, probably. But I can also be, I think it's also about where you choose to play full out. There are moments where I'm sort of all or nothing girl, really. I'll do something. If I'm going to choose to do something, I will do it. If I choose not to, I won't. So but I know that there are certain things I love talking about. So that's how I've interpreted that question, really, is the things that really interest me. And I'm sort of, as I get older, more inclined to sit and spend time in the things that really mean something to me. And being in service to leaders that I work with means something to me. So I'm probably there, but it depends again whether you're in flow or whether you're, the intensity and flow bit is still an interesting, I don't know if I've ever been called intense, and well, if I have, no one's called it to my face. You never know, do you? But passionate, yes. Stubborn, yes. Determined, yes. So it's all these different flavors,
Different nuances, and also the language we use. And you worked and observed many, many leaders,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So what would be your advice to our listeners who, for example, working with somebody whom they describe intense. What would be your advice in terms of how to approach such a situation and help the team to stay on purpose?
Probably to interrogate what they want. What are they trying to do? Ask them with curiosity, what's the main aim here?
Yeah. Curiosity is really a superpower, right?
Yeah. And then start to, if that's the aim, then you can share the impact. That's aligned with their aim.
Yes, share the impact that somebody is having. Wow, Sara, I have really enjoyed our conversation. And what I'm living with, that staying in healthy intensity is being aware of actually your own boundaries and boundaries of others.
Yes.
Is being in this unshakable self-belief and coming from the energy of nothing to prove.
Yes.
Connected to the purpose. And being present to self and present to others. And most importantly, taking it all lightly.
Yes. And know that it will change, that it will shift, that we're evolving all the time and we're never fixed in one state for always.
Exactly. And it's not either or, that now we're always in healthy intensity or now we're always in toxic intensity. It's a journey.
Yeah. And to be careful of labels. That would be my other
on that subject.
Yes.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Sara. Where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I have a podcast called Better Under Pressure. I've written a book called The Shed Method, and I'm on Instagram. That's probably the best place. And I have a company called Coaching Impact. So any of those places will find me. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you to our listeners. That was